consultation will be undertaken.
Thank you. We now move to First Minister's question. Question number 1, Johann Lamont.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. In a week where across the Chamber I know we are mourning the loss of our friend and fine parliamentarian Helen Eadie, may I ask the First Minister what engagements he has planned for the rest of the day?
First Minister.
I thank Johann Lamont for a question. It gives me the opportunity to express my personal condolences, and I know it's shared by every single person in this chamber about the passing of Helen Eadie. She was Johann Lamont's party colleague, but she's the parliamentary colleague of all of us. And I understand that Parliament will be given a chance next week to express its appreciation for Helen's contribution. In terms of government business, we'll be carrying forward the Government's programme for Scotland.
Johann Lamont.
Can I thank the First Minister for those kind words? And I know that across the Chamber there has been great comfort from the kind words that people have expressed at the loss, particularly for Helen's very precious family. Presiding Officer, on the 20th of March this year, a spokesperson for the First Minister said, and I quote, "The cast-iron position is an independent Scotland will continue to use the pound." With less than a fortnight to go before the White Paper is published, is that still the position of the Scottish Government?
First Minister.
Yes.
Johann Lamont.
That's interesting, for indeed I had thought we had experienced a historic day in Scottish politics. That's right. It would appear that someone in the Scottish Government has told the truth. Colin Mackay, Alex-Salmond's chief strategist, told a conference this week, and I quote, "We cannot assert as an a priori fact we can achieve a currency union with the United Kingdom." The First Minister's chief strategist is clear. No cast-iron guarantee can be given. Even in Alex-Salmond's world, it cannot possibly both be true that you can have a cast-iron guarantee and not have one. Now, given this rare moment of candour, can the First Minister now tell us what his plan B is if he is unable to negotiate successfully a currency union with the rest of the United Kingdom?
First Minister.
The point that was being made is quite a different one from the one that Johann Lamont's pursuing. The report is wrong in the paper today. The White Paper will be definitive on the policy positions of the SNP government. The point that's made is an entirely different one, and it was illustrated, I think, in the report by the question of the bedroom tax. It said it's not inevitable in an independent Scotland that the bedroom tax would be repealed. It would be inevitable if there was an SNP government in an independent Scotland. And the point that's been made is about the essence of independence, is about choice. I mean, it might be inevitable if there was a Labour government in an independent Scotland, assuming, of course, they turned up to vote. So, Johann Lamont would understand the point that's being made. The essence of the argument for independence is it gives people in Scotland the choice as to what they do. And I can assure Johann Lamont, and the White Paper comes up, it will be definitive about the policy choices of the Scottish National Party on the currency and on other matters. In that respect, the report was really talking, or the argument that was being made was about something else entirely. So if Johann Lamont will contain herself, wait and see, the White Paper will, I think, give her the information that she desires.
Johann Lamont.
Well, that wasn't so much cast iron as brass neck. Because the fact of the matter is, if the First Minister knows what his position is, he has an obligation not to share it with me, but with the people of this country who are concerned about their pensions, their mortgage, and whether they'll have a pound or not. Because we know that the First Minister is a master negotiator. We saw during that historic Edinburgh Agreement when he went into a room with David Cameron and gave David Cameron everything he wanted. So he will forgive me. So he will forgive me if I do not share his optimism about negotiating a currency union in a space of 18 months and getting a deal which works for the people of Scotland as well as the arrangement we have now. For, of course, Colin Mackay, the First Minister's chief strategist, is also concerned about this timeline. He says it is, quote, impossible unless the UK Government wanted to negotiate a smooth transfer of powers. Now, given that Alex-Salmond seems to believe that the people of England, Wales and Northern Ireland are so unreasonable that he has felt for all of his political life the need to break away from them, how confident is he that he can strike a deal with the Westminster Government in just 18 months?
First Minister.
It was, of course, the UK Government's paid legal adviser, that's Professor James Crawford, who described the 18-month timetable in terms of the transition as realistic in terms of some of the major issues that were to be discussed. So I think we can say, given I think that's the average of all negotiations across the world, I think if the UK Government's paid legal adviser, a distinguished professor of international law, describes that timetable as realistic, then I think we're on pretty firm ground as putting it forward as a timetable. The essence of the argument for the Stirling area, of course, is it's in Scotland's interest because England's our biggest customer, and it's in England's interest because Scotland is England's second biggest customer. You might even say it was logical and desirable. Except I didn't say that first. That was Alistair Darling, the leader of the No campaign in January of this year on Newsnight. And in terms of brass neck, I think what is a brass neck is writing, as in the case of Margaret Curran, to the Liberal Democrat MPs. I've got a letter here, Dear Alistair, that's to Alistair Carmichael, asking him to turn up to defeat the bedroom tax in the House of Commons. And then 47 Labour MPs, including 10 for Scotland, forget to turn up to defeat the bedroom tax. When it comes to brass neck, the SNP will have to go a long way to beat the Labour Party's brass neck on the bedroom tax.
Johann Lamont. Order.
This is an
Ms.
SNP
Lamont,
who couldn't stay up to support the minimum wage, who would not go through the lobbies and protect people against the energy companies that are ripping them off. And the First Minister says, the UK adviser says it can be done in 18 months. His own adviser says it can't be. This was the first time he's taken the advice of the UK Government ahead of his own advisers. And of course, on the point about Alistair Darling, Alistair Darling also said, but Mr Salmond must have a hidden fallback option because, quote, no one but a fool would go into a negotiation if they hadn't got a plan B. It would seem that we have a fool here who has no plan B on the currency. Presiding officer, I have to admit some concern about the well-being of Colin Mackay. We know what happens when people disagree with the First Minister. Has anyone seen Alec Bell since he appeared in Newsnight? Did he get a visit from Shona Robison? Is he in the same gulag as Professor Chris Whatley? For the reality is, isn't it the case that the First Minister doesn't want to give the people of Scotland the truth about independence in this debate because his case doesn't add up? And in fact, isn't it the truth that the First Minister can't stand having a debate with the people of Scotland at all?
First Minister.
Well, the last time I saw Alec Bell, he was appearing on television saying what a nice person I was. Unlike Labour special advisers like Damon McBride, who make lots of money by revealing the extent of bullying, intimidation and all sorts of other things within the last Labour government. So I think, let's put it this way. The report is wrong. The White Paper will be definitive in the SNP policy positions. It will also say, and of course it should say, the whole essence of independence is about the choice for the people of Scotland. So people in Scotland can choose their own government, as opposed to having another government foisted upon them. I believe on things like the bedroom tax that the SNP and the other parties in an independent Scottish Parliament, I can't conceive of a circumstance where they wouldn't repeal the bedroom tax. So therefore I think that is an argument for independence. That does assume that people turn up for the vote, and I really do think we deserve an explanation as to why, after appealing to Alistair Carmichael to turn up to vote against the bedroom tax, that 10 Labour MPs went missing AWOL this week and allowed that vote to proceed against the people of Scotland. Now, Johann Lamont objects to me citing Professor James Crawford and Alistair Darling in terms of, first, the transition timetable and the arguments for a sterling area. I just merely put it to Johann Lamont, if I'm able, as I am in this case, to cite Professor James Crawford, to cite Alistair Darling, then it's not going to be the most difficult negotiation we've ever had if the people on the other side of the argument think it's logical and desirable, and it's not going to be the most difficult transition we've ever had if even the paid legal adviser of the UK Government, Professor James Crawford, is honest enough to say it's a realistic timetable. So given that, and given that reassurance, then I think we can genuinely say we can all look forward to the White Paper, enthusiastically charting that new future forward for Scotland, with the essence of the argument being, let's get the future of this country into Scottish hands, and let's make choices for the Scottish people based on the democratic view at election time.
Question number 2, Ruth Davidson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And can I add the condolences of myself and of my party to those from right across this chamber on the passing of Helen Eadie. She'll be missed from this Parliament, and our thoughts and prayers are with her family and her colleagues at this time. And can I ask the First Minister when he will next meet the Prime Minister?
First Minister.
No plans near future.
Ruth Davidson.
Let's return to Professor Chris Whatley. He's a respected academic from Dundee University who spoke a fortnight ago at a meeting of like-minded Scots. At that meeting, he expressed his support for Scotland staying within the United Kingdom. Like thousands of others right across Scotland, he gave up some of his free time to debate and discuss the future of our country in a public meeting. We should be welcoming that contribution and the contribution of others to our national debate. Instead, because he disagreed with the SNP's position, a government minister contacted his employer to question his integrity. Will the First Minister tell us, was Shona Robison right or wrong to contact the Principal's office?
First Minister.
I see the much-beloved, angry, intimidating phone call that Better Together have been tweeting all over the place has suddenly been missed out the question, understandably, because no such phone call ever took place. The point that Shona Robison was pursuing in answer to a press inquiry was the question of not Professor Whatley's participation in the No campaign, which he's absolutely entitled to do, and I would encourage him to do, but the question of leading the 5 million questions project, which says it has the objective neutrality of academia and therefore ideally placed as a forum for illuminating discussion. Now, let me say I am enthusiastic about that project. I'm enthusiastic about Professor Whatley's participation in that project. I'm enthusiastic about the debates that are being held by that project. And you know why? Because every time there is a debate on this question, the yes side ends up winning. I've got example after example. So Professor Whatley should arrange as many debates as possible. If he can manage 5 million, all the better. Let's have the 5 million.
Ruth Davidson.
I noticed the First Minister was incredibly specific to deny a phone call, but did not deny that a contact was made between the Minister and the office of the Principal of Dundee University. And that says it all. You say something that the SNP doesn't like, and you can expect an intimidating contact. You can also example, if any were needed, of the SNP's reaction to something they don't like to hear. We also have a First Minister that refuses to condemn such tactics and refuses to back free speech. But let's contrast. Let's contrast Professor Whatley's treatment. Let's contrast Professor Whatley's treatment with that of another respected academic. In August, Dr. Elliot Bulmer wrote a prominent newspaper article on behalf of the pro-independence campaign. And not just that, Yes Scotland paid him for it. So if you're an academic that writes in support of independence, the separatists will put a cheque in your hand. But if you're an academic who speaks in support of Scotland staying in the UK, an SNP minister will collar your boss. Chris Whatley's treatment by this government has so outraged the academic community that a group of Scottish professors wrote an open letter saying, and I quote, "It is unacceptable for a minister to question the integrity of an academic on the basis of his or her political beliefs." Emeritus Professors Susan Shaw, Hugh Pennington and Ronald Roberts say that the minister's actions were wrong. Can I have the First Minister's guarantee that no member of his government will act in such a manner again?
First Minister.
I have to say the accusation is total and utter nonsense. The words intimidation and Shona Robertson don't sit easily together. I'd have to say, actually, the words intimidation and Ruth Davidson don't sit easily.
First Minister, can you sit down? Ms McMahon, I am not going to have an argument with you over the chamber. Will you desist? First Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I was just pointing out the words intimidation and Shona Robertson don't sit easily together, and I don't think Ruth Davidson lends her argument any favours by making that point. I actually thought, if I remember correctly, Elliot Bulmer was subjected to the most vigorous and unfair attacks from Ruth Davidson's own political party. But I suspect Elliot Bulmer was able to withstand the assaults of the No campaign. And can I just point out, I was going to say that Ruth Davidson is trying to make a meal of something. She's not even making a meal, she's creating a morsel out of absolutely nothing whatsoever. I have already said I absolutely endorse Professor Whatley's objective neutral chairing of the 5 million campaign and his objective neutral chairing of the No campaign in Dundee. I endorse Michael Mara, the director, one of the directors of that 5 million campaign as well. Michael Mara, somebody I've still to thank profusely for his decisive role in the election campaign by guiding Ian Gray into a subway. Now, I fully endorse the 5 million questions campaign. We will attend all of the debates which are held by that organisation in the full knowledge that in that atmosphere of objective neutrality of academia, the Yes campaign will prevail. And given I've endorsed not just academic freedom, freedom of speech, but undertaken to attend 5 million debates, perhaps on that basis Ruth Davidson will cease and desist.
Question number 3, Drew Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister whether he will provide Parliament with an update on the Scottish Government's discussions regarding the future of the Clyde shipyards.
First Minister.
Well, last week's announcements by BAE Systems of 1,775 redundancies in its shipbuilding business, including 835 in Scotland, was deeply disappointing and a major blow to those individuals who will be affected. The Scottish Government's first priority has to be to those workers who will face redundancy. We have offered support to BAE through these employees through the Partnership for Action for Continuing Employment, the PACE programme. We will work with BAE and with the trade unions to provide a tailored package of support with the aim of minimising the time that people are out of work.
Drew Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I thank the First Minister for his comments regarding those who are likely to lose their jobs, and I hope Parliament has the opportunity to debate the issues around that further. But on Tuesday, a UK Defence Minister repeated the crystal clear position that the UK Government does not and would not procure British warships from out with the UK. I'm not sure if industrial language was used when the Deputy First Minister met with the unions at the yards, but I understand that she was told the same in no uncertain terms. So will the First Minister now accept that, given the Clyde yards are owned by a UK defence contractor reliant upon UK defence contracts and which wants to build UK defence ships in Glasgow, the biggest threat to the governing Scotsman yards building the Type 26 frigates is his desire for Scotland to leave the United Kingdom?
First Minister.
Well, I gave the first reply quite deliberately because I do think, looking at this debate, some of the attention has left its focus from the 835 people who are facing redundancy. And what I hope to be able to follow up with Drew Smith, and I'm going to do it anyway because this is the issue that's facing these people right now, today actually, is that John Swinney and Nicola Sturgeon obviously attended a meeting with unions and management last Friday. I spoke to BAE yesterday. I spoke to McCord, the Managing Director of Naval Ships, about the progress in discussions with the unions that have been taking place this week. We've now got visibility on the timescale of these redundancies, which is very helpful in terms of operating the PACE programme. And on this substantial skill set that many of these people had, we should be optimistic at even this difficult task of placing as many as possible into gainful employment. And we've been assured of full cooperation from both unions and the BA management in order to do that as a priority. And I really do think that is the substantive issue we should be talking about. Now, on the matter of the issues that were raised, I don't accept his interpretation of the evidence that was given in the House of Commons. On the contrary, what was said in the House of Commons, that the claims that Article 346 would preclude the rest of the UK ordering Type 26s from the Clyde were absolutely wrong. The argument put forward by Alistair Carmichael only on Sunday that that would be the case was then denied by his own colleague in government in front of a House of Commons committee. And that brings us to the nub of this argument, does it not? As people, and including the workers in these yards, got the right to expect that every politician will rally behind them in Scotland, regardless of the constitutional circumstances? Or do they have people who are conditionally in support of these workers, depending on their favoured constitutional option? Which is why Jamie Webster, the union convener at Govan, on Newsnight last week said, if the situation is that Scottish people by democratic vote yes, I would expect, demand that every single politician of every single section supports us to hell and back. Perhaps Drew Smith might take these words to heart.
Sandra White.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I thank the First Minister for his reply, and I also am very grateful for the Deputy First Minister and the Cabinet Secretary for the meetings that they have had with the workforce and the trade unions, and have written to them and received replies also. First Minister, many of the local businesses in my constituency which serve the workforce in the shipyards will be affected by this announcement. Can I ask what help will be offered to them by the Scottish Government?
First Minister.
The PACE programme and the Scottish Government will be looking very closely at the heavy interconnection of the Clyde yards with local businesses, and that will be very much part of our planning. If I could offer Sandra White some indication of this, she'll see in the report, I think in the Herald today, that and a Herald editorial on the matter, of the substantial success that's been achieved by a similar programme in West Lothian following the closure in Broxburn last year. Obviously, there is a big challenge that's going to have to be met, but the fact that that challenge has been met pretty successfully in other areas who've been faced with significant closure should give confidence that the resolve will be there to do everything we can for these workers and, as she rightly says, the attendant businesses who supply the yards.
Question 5, Neil Findlay.
To ask the First Minister what steps the Scottish Government is taking to address the amount that the NHS spends on medical overtime.
First Minister.
In this year, £16 million has been invested across NHS Scotland to increase the capacity of the service. Some examples of this: £8.7 million in NHS Lanarkshire, which includes the recruitment of 54 consultants, nursing and other clinical support staff. £6.9 million in NHS Forth Valley, including the recruitment of new consultant nurses and other clinical support staff. £2 million in NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde, orthopaedics, ophthalmology, neurosurgery, neurology and imaging. And these efforts build on the 23.4% increase in the number of consultants working in the National Health Service since this government took office.
Findlay.
First Minister, the vacancy rates in the NHS are up at the same time as Audit Scotland have highlighted a 62% increase in spending on agency nursing and a 23% increase in payments to the private sector. And now we find out that some consultants are doubling their salary on triple time in the evening and weekends. Will the First Minister end crisis management in the NHS, and will he commit to staffing our hospitals properly?
First Minister.
Well, yes, we do staff our hospitals properly, which is why, even under these stringent financial times, the number of qualified nurses has increased by over 1,000 under SNP government. The capacity of the NHS is increasing all the time. Patient satisfaction with the NHS is very high indeed. Now, even given the real terms increase, which this government pledged and has delivered to the NHS revenue budget, we all understand the pressures on a National Health Service at the present moment, and indeed pretty well constantly. We understand that, which is why we've responded in full measure. Perhaps the member would give some consideration, Neil Findlay, to what would have happened if Labour had continued either their indecisive attitude to a real terms increase in National Health Service budget before the last election in Scotland, or indeed the practice in Wales, where Labour is in government, where there's been a real term decrease in NHS funding. Perhaps some consideration to what would have happened under these circumstances would be forthcoming from Neil Findlay.
Thank you for your patience and indulgence. Question number 4, Rod Campbell.
To ask the First Minister what the consequences are of his trip to China.
First Minister.
Well, I'm delighted, Presiding Officer. The visit cemented Scotland's valuable links with China and Hong Kong. There was a delegation of 30 Scottish companies in the oil and gas and construction sector on the trade mission. Some excellent contracts and deals were signed, some engagement with universities. The designation of Heriot-Watt as a further Confucius University in Scotland was a substantial step forward. The oil and gas involvement was particularly useful in terms of both CNOOC and Sinopec, some of the biggest oil and gas companies in the world. Just for example, Sinopec has 1 million employees, and taking a dozen Scottish oil and gas service companies into the heart of decision-making in that huge combine is of huge importance. So I think we'll get substantial results from this visit, but it builds on the progress that's been made in economic and trade relationships with China in recent years.
Rod Campbell.
The First Minister for that answer. Between 2010-11 and 2011-12, the number of Chinese students studying at universities and colleges in Scotland rose by 22% to 8,075. What steps can the Scottish Government take to ensure that Scotland remains an attractive place for Chinese students to study?
First Minister.
Well, Scotland is a hugely attractive place for Chinese and indeed other international students to study, which is why we've got a record number of international students, as well as a record number, of course, of Scottish students in our universities this year. I have to say that the major obstacle is, of course, the UK Government's attitude to educational visas. And we had a spectacular instance of how self-defeating this can be during my trip to China, where, for some inexplicable reason, the UK Border Agency decided to order out 2 of the handband the Chinese paid for teachers of Mandarin in Scottish schools. Now, luckily, we were able to reverse and pressure to reverse that ridiculous decision, but the threat remains to other teachers and other international students in that position. Now, most things in politics and government have 2 sides, and people just have to take what you think is the best option. But I cannot, for the life of me, see any reason whatsoever why it's in the interests of anyone to either restrict our relationships in terms of China and the 5 Confucius universities we now have in Scotland, more than any other country in the world per head of population, or the interrelationships and the valuable boost immediately to education and in the long term for the Scottish economy for having international students in Scotland. And if any member of this chamber can enlighten me what on earth goes on in the minds of the Home Office of the Border Agency to pursue such a restrictive policy, I'll be very interested. I think it's, incidentally, one of the big advantages that we would have from taking control of these things in Scotland.
Gavin Brown.
I have to say, Presiding Officer, he was a little less critical of the UK Government when he was in Hong Kong last week. He said this: Scotland is in a strong position because we share a regulatory system with London. Should we continue to share a regulatory system with London?
First Minister.
I don't know. I'm delighted that my speeches are read, and hopefully not just the Daily Telegraph's unique interpretation of the speech I made in Hong Kong, but that is the policy position that's been put forward in a number of papers on these matters, and I'm sure the member is fully grasped of these opportunities. But can I say that that speech in Hong Kong went down extremely well, and extolling the virtues and success of the Scottish financial sector, I think it was an excellent thing to do, and we should not neglect, and we will not neglect, the opportunities with the Scottish connection with Hong Kong and the range of global Scots who are working hard for Scottish business and interests. But perhaps we should have some sort of more formal arrangement, because I wouldn't want the member to miss out on any of my speeches or to rely on press interpretation. So perhaps a direct line of information is called for, and I undertake to see if that's possible.
Question number 6, Marco Biagi.
First Minister, what steps the Scottish Government and NHS are taking to increase awareness and understanding of HIV?
First Minister.
Well, HIV remains a public health priority for the Scottish Government. That's why we provided £273,000 of funding for Waverley Care in the last 2 years to deliver the Always Here campaign, which seeks to increase awareness and understanding of HIV and challenge stigma. The Government have also provided £270,000 of funding each year for HIV Scotland, a national independent policy organisation for HIV. Will be working with partners, including the NHS boards, to promote, of course, World AIDS Day on the 1st of December.
Biagi.
The First Minister will be aware of the study released this week by Waverley Care, showing that we still have some way to go as a nation on awareness. That charity, supported by campaigner Annie Lennox, have identified the ongoing stigma that the First Minister mentioned as a particular challenge for HIV in achieving diagnosis and accessing treatment. Does the First Minister agree that stigma is a major problem, and will he continue to ensure that the Scottish Government does everything it can to ensure that there are no obstacles to people coming forward for treatment and medical help?
First Minister.
I'm glad that Mark Biagi has taken the opportunity to raise this important subject. It gives us all the opportunity, incidentally, to acknowledge Annie Lennox, first-class work in this area. But Waverley Care's campaign has distributed resource packs in recent months which focus on highlighting the issue to young people. They have also distributed 1,500 resource packs to churches across the country. In addition, in early 2014, the campaign will begin work with health professionals, as people living with HIV have reported that they often experience stigma. I hope that reassures the member that we take these matters extremely seriously. We'll continue our support, and I think collectively, I'm sure the whole Chamber endorses these efforts and urges us to do even more.
That ends First Minister's question. Point further, Jackson Carlo.
Officer, in his earlier response to Ms Davidson, the First Minister asserted in his answer that Dr Elliot Bulmer had been subject to personal attack and abuse from Ms Davidson and her party. Given the substance of her earlier question, we reject that accusation fully. Now, the First Minister did qualify that by saying that it was a memory drawn from his recollection, and that in the ordinary course of events he does ascribe the widest possible latitude to that resource. But I would ask you, Presiding Officer, for him to either come forward with substantive evidence to support that accusation, or to correct the record at the earliest possible opportunity.
That is not a point of order, and the member knows, as I have said repeatedly, members themselves are responsible for what they say in the Chamber. That ends First Minister's question. I now move on to members' business. Members who leave the Chamber should leave so quickly and quietly.